Welcome to the build guide for the Goblin King's throne room from BrokenToad, Blacksun Miniatures and the Jim Henson Company. Okay, so once you've cleaned and washed your miniature in warm soapy water and let it all dry out, we're going to start cleaning up some of the parts and putting it together. So first of all, we need to remove this tab on the bottom of the drapes. So you can either clip that off, saw it off, or just gently shave it all off with a sharp scalpel. As always, be very careful if you are new to the hobby and using sharp instruments, and if you are younger, please seek adult supervision. So this is how the drapes fit onto the base. Now, but before you put those on, you need to put the seat. Now, the indent on the seat should be at the front towards the left, and that will slide up into the drapery. Fits on like that. What you will need to do though is find a way to squeeze that together just to give it a really nice fit. So first of all, we'll pop some glue on the inside of the drapes and we'll get the seat mounted inside. Now, to squeeze this together, I used a small clamp which are readily available from most hardware stores and in the UK from Pound Shop. So just keep it clamped for a little bit, just while the super glue has time to cure. So for the top of the throne, you just need to trim off any excess resin, any flash, and just make sure there aren't any mould lines on there. And then we'll move to Jareth himself. Not a lot to do on him. There's a resin gate at the bottom which just needs trimming off, and a mould line down the side. So just take your time, be careful, and just scrape that line down. So his legs come in two halves, and there is a resin gate on the one side which you'll need to slice off, and just make sure the surface is nice and flat. As always, give them a quick test fit just to make sure you know how they go together and whether there's any trimming needing to be done, and then we can glue them. Whilst that's curing, we can undo the throne, and then we can get that mounted on the base itself. Here we go. Top section of the throne, you just need to pop a little bit of super glue on each of these protrusions. Just make sure you don't put too much, you don't want it to run down the actual cloth. And then just make sure it's sat properly at the back. Squeeze it down with your fingers and that'll set very quickly. So it's easier to situate Jareth once he's got all of his torso on, so what we'll do is we'll give that a test fit and glue it in place. And then you can have a rough idea of how he sits, although it is a lot easier once he's got his arms on as well. So looking at those, there's a small resin gate at the top of his left arm, which you just need to slice off. And a little bit on the elbow of his right. Which is in fact his left arm, so just pay attention to the video. And that sits there. They it can only go on one way, so it is fairly self-explanatory. So just a little bit of super glue, and we'll get that other arm in place. Next we'll sort out his hand, which is holding his staff. And the end of the staff rests on his knee, so just make sure you remember that. There we go. So, the next piece is part of the throne. Now it's quite tricky. It is, in fact, easier to get Jareth glued down first. So if you are going to paint him, make sure you do that first and then move on to this bit. So you just want a bit of glue on his foot and then on the seat itself. So you need to have his one foot on the floor, one foot rests on the arm of the throne. Now this piece you can slide under the arm and down, and you may need to trim it to get it the right length to sit underneath his arm, because that's where he's supposed to be resting his arm on, so it's got to fit between that and the floor. So once it's all glued in place, it should look like that. So that's Jareth and the throne itself done, and now we'll move on to the goblins. The goblins are quite fiddly, so take your time, don't rush it. If things don't glue the first time, if you're new to this, then just be really patient with it. So we've trimmed down any excess bits and pieces and excess resin on these, and we're going to glue down the spiky helmet for the goblin that's on the right hand side. Just be careful pushing down that helmet because those spikes are quite sharp, also quite fragile, so they can break. Now his arm grips onto the helmet, so just pop a little bit of glue on the elbow. It's secure enough that you don't need to put any on the where the hand meets the helmet. But again, it's quite fiddly, so just take your time with it. There we go. So now we'll do his legs, which do come in two parts. It is easier to put them on to the body one at a time, rather than doing both halves and then putting it onto the body. So the half with the tail goes on first, and the tail slots through his sort of coat tails at the back, and the other fits next to it. Like that. And he will sit on the corner. There is a slight indent on the corner of the base where his leg fits on. And that's the other arm which hangs forward. So moving on to the second goblin. The torso and the legs, the fit is, you can tell when it's in place, because it only fit in that one area, and it is turned to the side. So then his left arm goes out at a right angle, otherwise it'll hit the floor, so you need to have it pushed back. And the other one comes across the body, sort of resting on his feet, like so. Now the last piece is the tail, which fits on the back there, but it loops round the thin section of the throne, like so. So you've just got to remember that. You can glue it onto the goblin first, that's fine, but you've just got to remember that you need to slide it around that small piece when you're putting it on. Like that, so the end hangs over, and his foot should sort of balance against the decoration on the base itself. And there we go. All done, if that goblin will sit correctly, as goblins tend not to. So, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope this has been useful to you. This has been the build guide for the Goblin King's Throne Room from BrokenToad, Blacksun Miniatures, and the Jim Henson Company. Bye-bye.